There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I am your host, Richard Shoff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes of Kannapolis, North Carolina. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, hereby only by the grace of God. Any of you listeners that have an interest in a fine log cabin, if you call me at 800-848-3310, I'll be happy to work with you personally and get you a great deal on a log home. Folks, today I feel that we are, at this time in America, we have a problem beyond problems we've been discussing or that many of us have even down deep been aware of. I want to discuss it first on the program. It's a category, in my opinion, all by itself. We've got a great deal of confusion on the immigration problem. Children being separated from their families. Trump made to look like a villain, while actually he's only enforcing laws that were put on the books by Obama and Clinton years ago. They weren't enforced then, and he's called for enforcement. But let's look at the big picture. Let's look at America today, right now. Right now, they're at a major point of decision, not just for the Trump administration, not just for the next 4 years or 8 years, but for our future as a nation and how and what America will really be in the next few years. What are we going to become? It's not just a American situation, it's a world situation, but we are concentrating on America in this program. Has the West got the will to survive? If we're pathetically weak, our country's going to be overrun with millions of people. And if we're strong, then we don't have any heart. That's a tough dilemma. I'd rather be strong. That was a quote from President Donald Trump. He said that upon issuing his order halting the separation of children from parents, those caught breaking into the country. Trump's enemies are celebrating a victory, yet the problem remains. Let me interject, folks. This is not legal immigration. There's a procedure there. It all happens where you go through the ports and you go through immigration, you apply for a green card or whatever, eventually citizen. This is the illegals, the ones swimming the river. That's what we're talking about here. Under the United States law, teenagers and other youth can't be legally detained for more than 20 days. Trump didn't make the law. Congress made the law under the Democrats. And these youth got to be held in the least restrictive facilities. But if the children can't be separated from their parents as they await trial, what's going to happen? And it's going to take months, maybe years, for the parents to get cleared up or get kicked out or whatever we're going to do. But what's going to happen? We're going to go back and have catch and release. That's where we were under Obama. And when that welcome news hit Central America, folks, the migrant stream moving north is going to become like a river that never ceases to flow. The question America and the West have got to face, we've got to face it. And maybe it could be framed as follows. If there's a liberal, progressive, Christian way to seal a 2,000-mile border and halt the millions of migrants from crossing it illegally and send intruders back from where they came, is that possible? Or does the preservation of Western nations and people require measures from which the liberal societies today will reflectively recoil? It's a decision we're going to have to make. Does the survival of the West as a civilization require a ruthlessness that the West no longer wants, no longer is prepared for? That we really don't have it in our bellies to do? You know, let's look at some American history, what our forefathers did to build this country. We were not passive. We were not even polite in a lot of cases. We weren't kind. We were ruthless. The English settlers, when they came over, brought in about 600,000 slaves. They ethnically cleansed the Indians. They joined their cousins in a war to expel the French, then revolted and threw out those cousins to claim all the land of the Mississippi, all for themselves. It was all violent. It wasn't passiveness. Jefferson grabbed the vast Louisiana territory for $15 million from Napoleon. And Napoleon, they claimed, didn't even have the right to sell it. Andrew Jackson drove the Spanish out of Florida. He sent the Cherokee Indians packing on the Trail of Tears. He told a dissenting Chief Justice John Marshall where to go and how to do it. Sam Houston tore Texas away from Mexico. Jimmy Polk took the Southwest and California in a war that Ulysses Grant called the most useless and unjust war ever fought. When the South declared independence, Lincoln sent a 1,000,000-man army to march them back in a war that cost over 600,000 lives. William McKinney sent armies and warships to seize Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines. The indigenous people were not even consulted. You know what he said? God told me to take the Philippines. A quote from William McKinney, a president. The conquest and colonization of the New World and the creation of the United States and its rise to a world power required acts of aggression and war, of which many among our elites today, they're ashamed. They exhibit their guilt by tearing down the statues of the men who perpetrated the crimes that created America. But of these elites, it may be fairly said, they could never have built a nation like ours. They didn't have the backbone, the guts, the fortitude. This brings us again to the larger questions. While our forefathers would not have hesitated to do what was needed to secure our borders and expel intruders, it is not a settled matter as to whether this generation has the will, the guts to preserve or not. Progressives may parade their moral superiority as they cheer the defeat of the, quote, zero tolerance policy. But they have no solution to the crisis. Indeed, folks, many of them do not even see it as a crisis because they don't see themselves as belonging to a separate tribe, nation, or people threatened by an invasion from the third world. They see themselves as belonging to an ideological nation, a nation of ideas, whose mission is to go forth and preach and teach and all. And this, folks, is why the establishment was repudiated in the election of 2016. It was perceived as too elite, too liberal, too weak to secure the borders and repel the invaders. If you're really, really pathetically weak, the country's going to be overrun with millions of people. Our president said this last Wednesday. Is he wrong? Since the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's grown apparent that the major threat to the West comes not from Tsar Vladimir Putin's Russian divisions returning to the Elbe River. The principal threat comes from the South. Half a century ago, a guy named Hourio Borodin, the leader of a poor but militant Algeria, allegedly proclaimed at the United Nations, quote, "One day millions of men will leave the southern hemisphere to go to the northern hemisphere. And they'll not go there as friends, because they'll go there to conquer it, and they will conquer it with their sons. The wombs of our women will give us victory." End quote. This is the threat. This is the crisis of the West. Thus, Trump seeks to build a wall to turn back the invaders and bring Putin back into the Western camp where Russia belongs. Thus, a new populist regime in Rome blocks votes of refugees from landing in Italy. You've seen it on the news this past weekend. Of course, the new socialistic government of Spain agreed to take them in. Angela Merkel looks like yesterday, and Viktor Orban like tomorrow. Folks, we're at a crossroads throughout the Western civilization. We're primarily concerned right here in America, but we've got it worldwide. The North coming into the South to outbreed us, outvote us, and take over our cultures. And the United States may well be on a road to becoming ungovernable. For a long time, we've seen the division in modern America political discourse, and personally I've become concerned about where all this anger and frustration has taken us. In order for any society to function, there's got to be some form of government. And in order for government to function, a certain percentage of the population has to be willing to submit to the authority of that government. For example, there will always be a few tax protesters out there that refuse to pay their taxes. But if every single American suddenly decided to stop paying taxes, our system of taxation would collapse overnight. We saw a threat to this. Can you remember back at Vietnam when we had the war protesters and some people wouldn't pay taxes because of the war? Personally, I thought we might have a similar situation over abortion. Some people said their conscience would let them support Vietnam. Some of the rest of us wouldn't let our consciences be used to bring in taxpayer dollars to murder unborn children. Sure, the government could prosecute thousands of us. But if that crackdown still didn't motivate people to start paying their taxes, there wasn't much that could be done about it. The only reason any form of government works is because enough people buy into the narrative that the government is legitimate and should be respected. Here in the United States, fewer and fewer people are buying into that narrative. The Pew Research Center, Gallup, NPR, they've all run polls to show that faith in government is near all-time lows right here in the United States. A lot of us have been let down so many times, and most of us simply do not believe in America like we once did. Oh yeah, we still believe in the people or the values that the nation was founded on, but our core, we just do not have faith in our government institutions. I personally lost a lot of faith in our government when we had Obama in there. I know a lot of you did. But simply being disillusioned is not going to be enough to make us ungovernable. Generations of Americans have complained about government, but they've always gone along with the system. Unfortunately now, things are changing in a fundamental way. Instead of just complaining about government, Americans are trained to think of government as the enemy. We're certainly witnessing a great deal of that. We saw it under Obama, and without doubt Obama was absolutely terrible. But now under Donald Trump, things have gone to an entirely new level. We literally have millions of people in this country that truly believe that President Trump is a moral equivalent to Adolf Hitler, and the Republican Party is a bunch of fascists. Of course, some conservatives have been saying similar things about Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the Democrats for years, me among them. But with Trump, we're witnessing something that we've never seen before. The mainstream media is actually pounding the drumbeats of hatred for our president day after day. And when you say something long enough, folks, and say it loud enough, some people are going to start to believe you. If you truly believe that someone's just like Adolf Hitler, the logical response would be to do whatever is necessary to end that tyranny. And if this is precisely what we have seen, we've seen it from Antifa, their open embrace of violence is justified in their eyes because of the enemy that they're fighting. It's not just Trump, folks, that the left is targeting. Just this week, a deranged man in Ohio was arrested for threatening U.S. Congressman Brian Mast. A Stewart, Ohio man was arrested this past week after a federal complaint states he threatened U.S. Representative Brian Mast's children over the Trump administration of child separation, that immigration policy. Lawrence K. called Mast West's office Monday and said, quote, "I'm going to find the congressman's kids and kill them." An intern took the call, told the FBI, and according to a federal complaint that was filed in U.S. District Court, that's what happened. He said, "If you're going to separate the kids at the border, I'm going to kill your kids." Well, for those of us that don't know Congressman Mast, he happens to be a double amputee. He lost both his legs serving our nation overseas. He's got a young girl and 2 young boys, all younger than 8. Are you starting to understand why good people don't run for office in this country anymore? Just the last couple of days, I saw something on it today where our Director of Homeland Security openly attacked and humiliated, driven out of a restaurant in Washington, there with her family. They're picketing her home today. I saw it today as I taped this broadcast on Saturday. Do honest people really have the stamina to run? Now that President Trump has signed an executive order that'll keep immigrant families together at the border, the left is got to come up with something else to keep the rancor going. So now we're being told that President Trump is inhuman for putting entire families in cages at the border. You see those pictures, folks? Hey, those pictures are 6 years old. Those kids in those cages, that was under the Obama administration. But our liberal media, fake news, is making you think that Obama wasn't the one, that Trump is the one. But it really doesn't matter what the truth is. All they want to do is keep the narrative going. We've already reached a point where a certain percentage of the population is not going to recognize the legitimacy of our government, no matter who is sent to the White House. Millions upon millions of America refer to Donald Trump as, quote, not my president. Well, there were millions of us who never accepted the legitimacy of an Obama presidency. So who would the American people accept? Someone in the middle? Sadly, the truth is that Barack Obama and Donald Trump are probably the middle today. There's no longer a single set of values that unites our nation, and America is becoming more deeply divided with each passing day. The only thing that's really holding us back from mass rioting and chaos on a constant basis, in my opinion, is our massively inflated, debt-fueled standard of living. You see, as long as people have plenty of food to eat and lots of entertainment, whether it's professional sports, Netflix, movies, whatever it is, lots of entertainment to keep us sedated, it's going to prevent a complete and total societal meltdown. It's preventing it temporarily. But if our food and entertainment were to be taken away, the American people are primed for the biggest temper tantrum in the history of our nation. We've never had a president that's hated as much as President Trump, and the mainstream media keeps feeding that hatred on a daily basis. Whatever goes wrong over the next few years will be blamed on him. And the moment a real crisis hits, we could well start to see cities burn all over our country. Our second president, John Adams, once made the following statement, I quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." End quote. Today, the American people are not very religious, and they're simply not very moral either. Suicide rates are absolutely soaring, and we are deeply unhappy as a nation. Why wouldn't we be? We're a nation not only murdering millions of our own children, now making it legal to be a sodomite and accepting it even into many of our churches. It'd be wonderful if we could unite behind the values that this nation was built upon, but we discarded those values a long time ago, listeners. So now we face a very uncertain future, and it's only a matter of time before someone lights a spark that sets off mass unrest across the United States. I think you're going to find this interesting. Billy Graham's son is telling the sad truth here. It's never been said better than this from Franklin Graham. Time is like a river. You cannot touch the water twice because the flow that has passed will never pass again. Franklin Graham was speaking at the First Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida, when he said America will not come back. He wrote, I quote, "The American dream ended on November 6th, 2012. The second term of Barack Obama has been the final nail in the coffin of the legacy of the white Christian males who discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed the greatest republic in the history of mankind. A coalition of blacks, Latinos, feminists, queers, government workers, union members, environmental extremists, the media, Hollywood, uninformed young people, the forever needy, the chronically unemployed, illegal aliens, and other fellow travelers have ended Norman Rockwell's America. You'll never again outvote these people. It'll take individual acts of defiance and massive displays of civil disobedience to get back the rights we've allowed them to take away. It will take zealots, not moderates, not shy people, not reach across the aisle rhinos. It'll take people with backbone to right this ship and restore our beloved country to its former status. People like me, he wrote, politically irreverent, and I'll soon probably never be able to legally comment on or concern myself with the aforementioned coalition, which has surrendered our culture, our heritage, and our traditions without even a shot being fired. Folks, the Cocker Spaniel is off the front porch. The Pit Bull is in the backyard. The American Constitution has been replaced with Saul Alinsky's rule for radicals and the likes of Chicago shyster David Axelrod, along with international socialist George Soros. They've been pulling the strings on the beige puppet, and they've brought us Act Two of the New World Order. The curtain will come down. The damage has been done. The story has been told. Those who come after us will once again have to risk their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor to bring back the republic that this generation has timidly frittered away due to white guilt and political correctness. What can you and I do right now, folks? Certainly we can pray. We can take individual action when we have a chance. We can certainly vote the true old-timey American way. And now, folks, we've got to regard where we're at. We've got to look at where we are in history, the position of our republic. Oh, we've got a lot of daily programs going on, a lot of daily problems. We've got battles to fight. But this is something that I brought you now, and in my opinion, is big time, folks. We're going to have to continue to fight the smaller things, but we've got a major crossroads to face in America and in Western civilization.